What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Bush coming at you solo today to bring you basically an in-depth breakdown of the running back strength of schedule for the fantasy football playoffs. Now, I was going to do both running backs and wide receivers in this video, but instead I'm going to break that up into two videos and do wide receivers tomorrow because as you guys are going to probably see from this took me a while to do for running backs and I won't have enough time to do it for wide receivers in the same video while keeping everything concise and brief as well. So I'm sure you've seen other people, maybe you watch other YouTube channels, whatever, already do something similar to this, but I promise you this will be the most informative strength of schedule breakdown that you watch. So I encourage you to stay to the end. And if you do enjoy this video, as always, like, comment, and subscribe to the channel if you are new. I'm not just going to do the cookie cutter thing where I say this running back has the 29th ranked run defense in fantasy points allowed, so he has a great schedule. No, I'm going in depth. I'm bringing you a bunch of different metrics week by week, et cetera, et cetera. So let's not waste any more time. We're going to hit the intro and then we're going to get right into this. Okay, so quickly, I'm going to explain what I did here so I don't confuse anybody. So I encourage you to listen to this part and don't skip ahead. But what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to break down each week of the playoffs, week 15, week 16, and week 17. And I basically came up with a weighted average strength of schedule metric, and you'll see it along each week once we get into the first one. And I'll put it on the screen right now so you can see what I'm talking about. And after that, I added all three of those matchups together. So the week 15 average, weighted average number, the week 16 and the week 17 to create a cumulative, basically weighted average number for the entirety of the fantasy playoffs. Together, obviously the highest number is the better schedule, and adjusted fantasy points allowed, rush defense DVOA, and receiving fantasy points allowed is how I came up with these metrics. As you guys have probably seen in recent running back starts and sits videos, I've talked about these metrics already. I'll just quickly explain them so I don't confuse anybody. Adjusted fantasy points allowed accounts for the schedule that they've played against. So it's not simply how many fantasy points did they allow to running backs, because obviously that number will be skewed if you played Derrick Henry and Jonathan Taylor versus if you played the Seattle Seahawks running backs or something, for example. And then rush defense DVOA basically compares all defenses in the NFL to an average situation. And are you better or are you worse than the average run defense, for example? Receiving fantasy points allowed is pretty simple. It's just PPR points allowed to receiving production to the running back position. So you get a point for a reception to the running backs. You obviously get 0.1 point for every receiving yard that they get and 6 points for every receiving touchdown that they get. And that's just all kind of added up and ranked accordingly. All of those together will form the weighted average number, where I took 50% of the adjusted fantasy points allowed, 25% of the other two, DVOA and receiving fantasy points allowed, because we are talking about fantasy football here. So the adjusted fantasy points allowed metric is the most important. As you guys can see on the screen, this is what it spit out for week 15. Now, week 15, a lot of people will consider as the least important game in the playoffs. Unless you have a bye week, it is the most important, because in order to get to week 16 and week 17, you have to first win in week 15. And we can see that Myles Gaskin, as well as the Rams running backs, Darrell Henderson and Sony Michel, the Cowboys running backs, Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard, Elijah Mitchell and whatever 49ers running backs, and then the Cardinals running backs. Maybe it's James Conner still alone in that backfield. Maybe Chase Edmonds is back. We don't quite know that yet. But these guys have the easiest matchup based on the weighted average. And you can kind of see that bear out. Anything that's in green basically is going to be considered a good matchup for those players. We can see that these guys have the easiest matchup in week 15 based on the weighted average metric. And then conversely, basically, we have Leonard Fournette. We have the Packers running backs. We have the Bills running backs, Saquon Barkley and Chuba Hubbard. They have the hardest matchup in week 15. So like I said, week 15 is obviously overlooked by a lot of people. You have to win this week to move on. So it is important. It's the most important of all the playoff weeks, because if you don't win it, then you can't get to experience week 17 and week 16. And number two, the one thing I will say about week 15 is that if you have a bye week, then that may change how you view some of this stuff, because who has the best schedule obviously you'll only be concerned with week 16 and week 17 for your playoff schedule. Week 15 will not matter for you because you are already on bye. You don't need to win that week. And that is a situation that I am in every league that I'm currently in a playoff spot right now. I will have a bye week, so I don't need to worry about week 15. Maybe you're in that situation. Obviously, that is the ideal situation to be in, because you get a free pass into week 16. So let's move on to week 16. Week 16, like I said, could be the first game that you have in your fantasy playoff if you do have a bye week in week 15. For me, like I said, it looks like I will not have a week 15 matchup because I am currently in second place and I have a very easy matchup this week. So I should be able to secure a bye in my home league. And then in one of my dynasty leagues, I'm also in position for a bye. As you guys can see on the screen, James Robinson, David Montgomery, Miles Sanders, or whatever Eagles running back, DeAndre Swift, assuming he's back by then, it could be Jamal Williams still, and then Cordero Patterson have the easiest matchups in week 16, while Myles Gaskin, Joe Mixon, Leonard Fournette, Antonio Gibson, and the Patriots running backs have the most difficult. And like I said, you guys can look through these, and I'm sure whatever running backs you guys have on your team, you're looking for their name and seeing how well their matchup stacks up. But again, we are concerned with the entirety of the fantasy playoffs. So let's move on to week 17, the Holy Grail. Week 17, this matchup is viewed as the most important by most, but it is the least important, in my opinion. Of course, you have to win this to win the championship, but you have to make the championship in order to win it. And of course, we know a guaranteed good matchup doesn't mean you're going to win the championship necessarily. So week 17 should be the least of your concern. If you have a running back that has a bad matchup in week 17, but a great matchup week 15 and 16, you just have to hope that he can overcome that bad matchup in week 17 and you're fine regardless. So in fantasy championships, if you can get there, Leonard Fournette, DeAndre Swift, David Montgomery, Jonathan Taylor, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire have the easiest matchups according to this metric. The Bills running backs and the Seahawks running backs also have very good matchups, but I don't recommend probably starting those guys in your fantasy championship because their backfields are a complete mess. Of course, the guys that may disappoint you in the fantasy championship are Chuba Hubbard, the Rams running backs, Alvin Kamara, the Cardinals running back, Saquon Barkley, and so on and so forth. So what does this all culminate in, right? It's pretty easy for you guys to go, okay, my running back has a great matchup in week 15, but a bad matchup in week 17, so on and so forth. I'm sure you guys were doing this the whole time I was going through it, but let's take a holistic view. So I hid how we got the weighted averages, the integral parts of how we got there, and I just showed everything, the final product. So again, it was 50% adjusted fantasy points allowed, 25% rank in rush defense DVOA, and 25% rank in receiving production allowed to the running back position, if you guys forgot. So the final column that you guys can see on the far right there is the cumulative strength of schedule average, or simply who has the best schedule in the entirety of the fantasy playoffs. And these are the results. Again, these are the dudes with the best schedules, the guy that should be an asset to you for your fantasy playoff run, hopefully can lead you to a fantasy championship. Again, this may change if you have a bye or not. For example, in my case, because I'm expected to have a bye and I do have DeAndre Swift on my roster, I can see that even though DeAndre Swift has the best cumulative strength of schedule average, meaning he has the easiest schedule of any running back in the fantasy playoffs, it also benefits me because I'm going to have a bye, knowing that his two best matchups come in week 16 and week 17. So great news for DeAndre Swift managers. If you guys are in position for a bye like I am, he has his easiest matchups in the 2 weeks that we're going to need him. So that is great news. Same goes for Leonard Fournette. Leonard Fournette has two very hard matchups in week 15 and week 16. But if you can get to the championship, meaning you can supplement your team's production in week 15 and week 16 when Leonard Fournette has hard matchups, or maybe you have a bye in week 15 and therefore you will need to win in week 16 in order to get to the championship. He has the holy grail of running back matchups in the fantasy championship with the New York Jets, who are the single easiest matchup in the NFL against fantasy running backs. So if you can get to the championship and you have Leonard Fournette on your roster, he's probably going to have a huge game in that one, as will the rest of the Buccaneers team, because the Jets are pretty much bad at everything. So the top 5 easiest running back schedules, if I had to rank them right now, are DeAndre Swift, David Montgomery, Javonte Williams / Melvin Gordon, whoever's the starting running back in Denver, which is probably going to be Javonte Williams now, James Robinson, and the Cowboys running backs. And again, that could also be just Tony Pollard if Zeke Elliott's shut down or whatever the case is. But these guys have the league-winning running back schedules the entirety of the playoffs. And again, make adjustments here and there if you need to. If you have a week 15 bye, just look at week 16 and week 17. But conversely, the most difficult schedules for the fantasy playoffs go to Chuba Hubbard, the Patriots running backs, which could just be Ramondre Stevenson now that Damian Harris is dealing with a hamstring injury that he suffered on Monday night. The Packers running backs, Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon, and then Alvin Kamara. These guys have the hardest schedules among fantasy running backs, as you guys can see on the screen right now. So I hope you guys did enjoy this. I hope I was the bearer of good news for your fantasy running back core. In my case, I have DeAndre Swift and Javonte Williams both on my team. So both of my guys are in the top 3. And then I also have Antonio Gibson, who doesn't have a horrible schedule either. Hopefully the running back news that I gave you today was good news for your team and for your playoff aspirations and chances for you to win a fantasy championship. Maybe if you're in win now mode in a dynasty league and you haven't had your trade deadline, go trade for some of these guys that have easy schedules. If you want to go trade for James Robinson or somebody like that, or if you somehow don't have a trade deadline in your redraft league, you could do the same as well. Also, if you guys do want to support us in any way, you can check out underdogfantasy.com using promo code FSE at sign up and first deposit. You will get 100% match back on whatever you put down. So if you put down $25, you'll get $50 on the site, et cetera, et cetera. And you can play some of their playoff best ball that they have going right now. If you guys did best ball drafts or know what best ball drafts are going into the season, it starts your best lineup each and every week. Well, they launched a tournament for the NFL playoffs where you can do best ball. And obviously there's a hidden part of strategy in predicting who's going to go the furthest in the playoffs along with that. So that's going to be a lot of fun. If you want to support us in any way, go ahead and sign up on Underdog Fantasy using promo code FSE. You can use it in a lot of states, Underdog Fantasy, and also in Canada as well if you're from Canada like I am. Stay tuned for the wide receiver version of this video tomorrow, and leave me any feedback in the comment section if you want to make this somewhat easier, if it was hard to follow, et cetera, et cetera. I will be happy to help you out with that. So peace out, guys, and I'll talk to you soon.